Coming up next on Tech News Today, Jonathan Strickland joins me, and we have a lot of fun. We're going to talk about Snapchat's new Memories feature, which is kind of the antithesis of ephemeral. Also, Google's image recognition seems to be getting better and better with some new acquisitions. Sidewalk delivery robots are hitting the street, so watch out. Don't step on them. We determine whether robots are people, just like you and me, and summer grilling, courtesy of your drone, of course. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit. Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today, episode 1549, recorded Wednesday, July 6th, 2016. This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by Trunk Club. Get clothes that fit and look amazing without ever stepping into a store again. Trunk Club will help you create the wardrobe you've always dreamed of with your own personal stylist. Go to trunkclub.com/TNT and join Trunk Club today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tech News Today. We are the show where we talk about the latest tech news with people who happen to be passionate about technology, some people who happen to record show after show after show about technology all in a row. And I have a feeling that Jonathan Strickland, by the end of today, might be feeling it just a little bit because this is the first of, I think, 3 things he has to do tonight. So thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us, Jonathan Strickland from How Stuff Works.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here. So I am pumped.
Yeah.
Caffeine is going.
Boom.
It's awesome.
Cool. So do you normally drink caffeine like coffee this late in the day? Only when you have to?
Yeah. My wife usually, like the way my day works is by the end of the day, my wife texts me and says, should I bring you an iced coffee or 2 iced coffees?
Nice. She knows you. That's a keeper right there.
She sure is.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before the show about crazy days, and I think every Tuesday is about the day of the week that I'm normally used to taking a late coffee because I know it's just going to wreck me later. So you are a brave man, and I appreciate it because we've got some tech news to talk about. So let's do it. What do you say?
Absolutely. Let's get on this.
All right. So first things first, Snapchat is taking a trip back in time. Some would say their new feature called Memories that they announced today is the antithesis of what made Snapchat a popular messaging app in its early days. Rolling out today and over the next month, users will find the new feature. And what it allows users to do is save their snaps to Snapchat servers where they can access those memories at a later date. The promo video, I have to say, is pretty hilarious and maybe a little risque, I suppose, towards the end of it. But so what Snapchat is really doing here from everything that I've read is realizing that the photo roll for a lot of people, like the default camera nowadays, is Snapchat. And so that kind of puts Snapchat users in a strange kind of position if what you're using to capture these scenes, these events, whatever happens to be happening in your life is an app that then kind of discards that information and it goes away. This was a strength. This was a feature, has been a feature of Snapchat and has been the selling point for the service for the last 5 years. So this is a big shift. I mean, this is totally a shift in the opposite direction, kind of normalizing with the other services that do these sort of kind of photo-focused things. What do you think about this, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you've been able to save stuff on Snapchat to your local device for a while, but this is different. This is saving it to a server, not just a device. So that makes things a little easier if you're changing from one device to another, if you're upgrading or you lose a phone or something like that, you can now have access to that stuff. It is weird to see Snapchat kind of shift from this ephemeral, temporary existence where things only are there for 24 hours and they disappear. And it's kind of like live theater. You have to be there to experience it. And if you miss it, too bad, it's gone. But I get why they're doing this as more and more people use Snapchat with all the filters to be their photo taking app. And then they think, oh, that picture was really good. And I want to share it again. But it is weird. I mean, Snapchat's kind of had a double whammy, right? Because they just recently, there was the report that came out that said more people of a mature age were joining Snapchat.
are
So-
intruding, yes, interfering on the young's experience.
Yeah, I have a feeling that young Snapchat users right now feel as if the temporary sky is falling.
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, we have some Snapchat users. Kara, I'm going to pull you into this for a second because you've got a microphone and you weren't expecting me to pull you into this. So I apologize. But you are an avid Snapchat user. Kara, of course, is the technical director of this show. What do you think about Memories as opposed to kind of what Snapchat has been up until now?
I haven't seen it on my Snapchat yet. I haven't seen it update, but I don't think it's that bad. I mean, I know the point of Snapchat is everything is temporary and will go away, but I actually kind of think it's a cool idea because I have had snaps that I've really, really liked and then never saved them. And later, my friends have even told me like, why didn't you save that one of me? It was so funny. And so actually, if I had saved it or put it in Memories, maybe that would be a cool feature. So I'm not against it. I kind of like it.
Yeah, I think what I find interesting about this is, and we see more and more of this happening right now, is just that these services are pulling from each other. So they start as one thing that's very differentiated from the rest. You know, the Snapchat, its identity has been around the kind of ephemeral kind of nature of the service, the fact that the users that are using it, at least to a certain degree, are cool with the fact that, you know, the stuff that they do with the app and with the service is going to go away and it's not permanent, and that's kind of a feature. But now you've got a service that kind of brings it closer to something like Instagram or whatever. And, you know, and the other services are getting more ephemeral or getting more security minded. They're all just kind of blurring together at a certain point. But at the same time, I give Snapchat props because they are iterating really well. Like they are taking momentum that they have, and they're not kind of resting in the way that like a service like Twitter has done in the past. They're really kind of capturing that energy and moving forward with it. I think it's a good move.
Yeah, I think there are two other things I would say quickly about this story. One is that the move of Snapchat to go beyond what it used to do, and the move of other apps taking on some of the stuff that Snapchat was kind of doing. I mean, it makes sense in a way because you have to continuously try and grow your user base and encourage them. But it also reminds me of how television channels start off very niche oriented and then slowly start to lose that identity over years and years and years of being in business.
MTV.
Yeah, that's the quintessential example.
MTV.
Also Sci-Fi. Or
yeah,
sci-fi.
That's a great example for sure.
But the other point is that this ties into another story we have later on. The idea of the issue I have with Snapchat saving things, it's not really a problem with Snapchat. It's that there's so many apps now for pictures, for taking pictures and sharing pictures, that you're having silos of your pictures. Like either you're sharing it across everything, which feels weird because you feel like
spammy.
Yeah, you're shotgunning all of your friends with like the same picture across multiple platforms, or you're keeping each one unique, which is a lot of work, and you get like a fractured sense of who that person is.
Yeah.
So that'll come back later.
Yeah, it's a good call forward because we definitely have a story we'll talk about at the end of this news block that is related, though not to images, but to other things, but totally on that point. But let's talk about, I know one of your favorite topics, Jonathan, is sports ball. You're totally a sports ball fan.
Go our team, go.
Whatever it happens to be. Sports ball fans who are curious to know what Twitter's streaming of Thursday night football games this fall might look like now have an idea. At least as of today, Twitter began streaming from Wimbledon, tennis tournament. Of course, right now those tennis players are sleeping, but earlier today the page was hopping. It had a bunch of Wimbledon coverage on the left side player, and actually the link below that one on the dock will show you kind of the player page, so you can see it has the player on the side, which is, you know, programming has concluded for the day, as well as the Twitter stream related to it on the right side. So it's kind of all embedded in a single screen. You still have to, you know, tap to refresh the new string of tweets as they're posted. It kind of, you know, you get a little link up there the way you do when you use the normal Twitter web app. The bummer here, of course, is that actual matches weren't streamed. It's only live interviews, inside analysis, replays, all that kind of stuff from the event. But it gave you kind of an early inside look at what Twitter's working on when it comes to this kind of embedded, real-time, shared experience environment. It's not the most amazing web page, in my opinion, but I think when I was watching it earlier and there was actual stuff happening in the video player and then the tweets were rolling along, I could see how it could be a pretty kind of addictive environment for watching something that's as engaging from like a wider shared scale as sports. What do you think as a non-sports ball fan?
I think that this is a brilliant use of technology. I mean, we're all familiar with the concept of second screen experiences. Assuming that we get to a point where Twitter can partner with whatever entertainment or sports provider it happens to be working with, to a point where you can actually get the stuff people really want to see on that video player, I think something like this could take off. Can you imagine if this sort of approach were used in something like the Game of Thrones premiere?
Oh yeah, I know, right?
Like, because Twitter explodes as soon as that thing starts. Now, granted, that would be very difficult to do because the way these premieres work is different time zones get the material at different moments, so you'd have to work all that out. But if you could do that, I think that this sort of tool with Twitter would be really helpful, because you always see this gigantic online conversation around events like that.
Absolutely do. And I think, like, okay, so the page itself is not that impressive, right? Like, and even someone in chat was like, cool, it's like a split screen thing, big deal. And I don't think that necessarily what I saw and liked was that it was splashy and, you know, designed really well. What I liked about it is kind of what you were saying, Jonathan, that Twitter, it has become in some ways the ideal kind of like second screen experience. It's just, it hasn't been integrated into itself as an experience. A lot of companies have tried to do this whole second screen thing, and it never quite works. The beauty of Twitter is that there's already a ton of users, one, and two, they're already talking about this stuff. So having it in one single place that makes it easy to kind of have that embedded experience and encourage people to share in that way, I think is a really great start. So, and I mean, when you're talking about something like the NFL, which has an insane, you know, a rabid fan base, I think it's something to look forward to. I'm certainly going to check it out. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, even as the avid sports ball fan that I am, team go team, I'll definitely check it out too. Cause I want to see a good implementation of this idea. Cause like you were saying, Jason, we've seen this sort of attempt made multiple times and it usually ends up just missing the mark.
Yeah.
So I would love to see someone actually crack that and get it to work where you can have that sort of water cooler discussion that everyone wants to have integrated into your experience, so that you're not just constantly either looking at a big screen here and a little one over here or flipping between tabs.
Totally.
That's not ideal.
Completely agree. We have a few cool Google news stories and one rumory thing here in a few minutes, but let's start with the actual news. Google is continuing to kind of hunker down on its image search capabilities. First, Google announced today that it has acquired Mood Stocks. It's a small team that works on technology that it offers to developers. Basically what it does, it allows them to recognize objects by turning devices into, they say, smart scanners. Moodstock's YouTube channel has some videos that show off the technology running on a smartphone. It's very quickly able to recognize an object in front of the camera. In one case, it was a Nerf Triad X3 toy, for example, or a very specific, I think like an IKEA mug or whatever, just put it in front of the camera, recognizes it immediately. And supposedly this recognition is actually happening offline. So, I mean, you know, part of this reminds me of what Twitter's acquisition a couple of weeks ago of Magic Pony was kind of about something similar, something along these lines. And I really think just the overarching goal continues to be, you know, especially for Google, like it's already very good at taking context out of, you know, and searchable kind of bodies of data out of text that happens to be all over the web. Now it's just making images as searchable and as usable as possible. And I think it's a good move. What do you think about this?
Oh yeah, it's super cool. I mean, Google's quest obviously is to turn everything in the world into data and then make it searchable, so that eventually we're all living in Tron. And on it, I'm okay with that.
I'd live in Tron. I'd
yeah, I mean, Flynn's Arcade, super cool, awesome. Yeah, I know it's really fascinating to see how far machine learning has come in just the last few years, and image recognition being a big part of that. It's not even almost scary. It has gotten to the point where if you were to misuse this technology, it could be absolutely terrifying. But it is really inspiring too. The idea that you could have something so immediate and effective where you're able to recognize a specific IKEA mug. That is crazy.
Yeah, I feel like, especially with something like image search, a couple of years ago, I would have just assumed that it was too complicated. There's too much nuance. There's too many subtle changes and differences in images to do this truly, very accurately. But what we're realizing is that, Google has a lot of money. Companies like Google have a lot of money to throw at this. And it turns out you need a lot of computing power to make it work, but it's possible. And, what does that end up getting rolled into? Well, for example, Google Now on Tap, which is kind of the on-screen contextual recognition in Android devices. If you hold down the home screen, it'll kind of take a picture of what you have in your home screen and pull out of just that image. It's not taking the data, it's taking kind of more or less the image and running a search on that, and they're expanding on that, right? Like right now they just did an update that allows you to do translation from images that you take with your camera, as well as, barcodes, QR codes, all of this in the pursuit of what you're talking about, just making data out of something that didn't have a whole lot of contextual, information in it in a searchable way. Well, now it does, and Google's reaping the benefits of that.
And beyond that, I mean, to elaborate on your point, to me, the really phenomenal thing is it can do this live through a camera. It's not just taking a still image and identifying that.
Yeah.
But you could have totally different lighting angles. I mean, there's so many different factors that it has to account for, and it's still able to do this. And that's what I find so mind-blowing, because it's one thing to show, quote unquote, show a computer an image and teach it this is a cup. It's another thing to take a camera and either you're really far away or really close up and it still can identify what that thing is. Doesn't matter what color it is or the lighting or the angle. That's hard.
Yeah.
So seeing this kind of progress is really phenomenal.
Yep. And I love Google Photos for it. I mean, just the fact that I don't have to sort any albums or anything like that anymore, kind of removing the busy work out of this stuff and just allowing the algorithms and the AI behind the scenes do the hard work for you.
Absolutely.
I love it. Now for the little rumory Google news that I alluded to a few minutes ago. Takes some of Google's AI efforts and throws them onto your wrist. Android Police says it's extremely confident that Google is working on 2 Android Wear watches, possibly donning Google's exclusive Nexus brand that might integrate its announced but as yet unreleased assistant AI technology, which is the next phase of Google Now, basically. One watch is going to be larger, more fully featured, while the other one will be smaller, more streamlined, removing things like GPS and mobile data from it. But obviously the key point here, and what I find really interesting right now and what we're hearing month after month, is that Google's been dropping a lot of hints lately about how it wants to take more control over the hardware that it's producing, as well as the experience of those devices. And we're just getting this continual stream of rumors that seem to back up that sentiment. We've got the Chromebook Pixel, which is obviously not a rumor, the Pixel C, rumors of the in-house phone development, which we may see this year, may see next year, apparently. And now these watches, it really sounds like Google is buckling down behind the scenes again, after once owning Motorola, by the way, on its own hardware arm, and really kind of being okay with the fact that, it's going to, in some ways, go toe-to-toe against a lot of the manufacturers that have made Android as a platform a success. But I don't know. Is that a risky position to be in if you're Google? What do you think?
I think so. I mean, I'm no expert in this field, but I would say that it is interesting that Google seems to slowly be edging more toward the Apple way of doing things, right?
Yep.
Like it's something that for us early adopters of Android, we certainly never really expected that. At least I didn't expect that. I thought that the philosophy moving forward was we want to create an operating system and an environment that can be used on multiple platforms made by multiple manufacturers so that you can get the experience you want based upon whichever company out there is making the device that most appeals to you. And that was a great thing. I love that idea. Over time, as I've had frustration with certain types of devices, lagging way behind others as I'm waiting for an update that I know is available, but I can't get it on my device, I start to see the appeal of a more controlled approach, one that is top down from Google. But it still does seem to kind of go against that initial philosophy that debuted with Android.
Yep, I find myself kind of in the same boat that you're talking about here. More and more, it's really hard for me to not recommend Google's own kind of Nexus brand devices. And, you know, I mean, I talk about it all the time and all about Android, and I've been called out many times as being a Nexus fanboy. But, I mean, it's not just that I think the devices are great, but it's the closest to kind of a controlled device, you know, offering that you can get when it comes to Android. And whether that's closer or not to kind of Apple's approach, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think there's room in that particular market for what Google might be doing here. Of course, this is still kind of in the rumor category, so we don't know for sure or even if or when we'll see this stuff. But I don't think it's a bad idea. And that choice is still out there, even if Google does this. I guess the big question is, does that upset the partners, and does that move them away and into a different direction? And that would be, you know, kind of a bad scenario for Google if that did happen.
And can Google design a physical product that has the appeal that some of these, because I love Google, I love Android, I've got a Nexus phone as well, I'm a big fan, but I often think of Google as a place that engineers flock to, and engineers making products for other engineers, which are awesome. I love them, but they're not necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing approaches that you've ever seen. And contrast that with a company like Apple, where they have brilliant designers working on the aesthetics from day one, and that becomes a very important part of the product. Whether it appeals to you or not, that's kind of beside the point, but they put a lot of effort into that. And I question if Google will have that same capacity. I hope it does, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty happy. This is, of course, the old Pixel. This is the first Chromebook Pixel. From a design standpoint, I've been very happy with this device. And, you know, the Pixel C might not be the best device in the world, depending on what your use case is, but it's designed really well. It's designed really nice. I feel like Google's kind of getting to a point where I almost feel like what we're talking about right now is that they've reached a point to where they feel more comfortable taking it in their arms and you know, nurturing their own baby, so to speak, as far as that's concerned, instead of relying, you know, consistently on seasoned hardware makers to do this for them. They have a bunch of them that already work with the team, that have worked with those hardware makers to inform them of their desires and their choices. And now they kind of, you know, they've learned enough along the way that I think they could probably pull it off if they want to. We'll see if they choose to. I suppose that's a big question. And finally, what we were talking about a little bit earlier, that would be at the end of this little news block, Walt Mossberg posted a piece on The Verge he calls The Tyranny of Messaging and Notifications. Definitely worth reading, because there are many moments, at least in my opinion, where I wanted to stand up and just like scream to the hills. Then I realized I'd be, you know, rejoicing at a point of misery that messaging apps have only complicated the mess that began years ago with email. It's kind of all about how the electronic communication, you know, isn't made easier by all of these siloed ways to message people. It's made everything way more confusing. You're always asking yourself, you know, like, how do I contact this person when I need them? Do I need to send the same message to multiple places to make sure that that one person gets it? Did I miss something important when I was looking over there instead of over here? I had that happen in an SMS. It was like, why did I see the SMS? Because I was focused on this other thing. It's so annoying. And then you drop a social network or 5 or 10 of them on the top, and in the end, all you're really doing is shouting words into, you know, a million different places and hoping the right person hears what we have to say at the right time. And I was just like, yes, Walt Mossberg, you go. I don't know. It really spoke to me. What were your thoughts on this?
Jason, there's a great way of making the light drain from my eyes, and that's to tell me that there's yet another messaging app out there, or another social network. Look, guys, I'm old. All right,
I've got a confession to make.
I've hit the limit of social networks I am capable of maintaining.
Yeah.
And even you could argue I'm not even really doing that right now. So I agree entirely that the fact that you have all these different options makes it really frustrating in many ways. I mean, I've seen a lot of different apps that are trying to address this by inviting you to allow SMS to go through that messaging app too.
Right.
That's a nightmare. I don't like that either. It's because it ends up being like you start thinking, oh, well, now my SMS is kind of going through another server, and that's kind of weird and uncomfortable to think about. But I have a friend who, when she sends me messages, it's either coming through Google Hangouts, Facebook Messenger, or text message. She uses all three. And sometimes I feel like I'm having conversations with three different people. It turns out I'm not. I'm actually talking to the same person. She's just occasionally hopping back and forth to whatever she's using at that moment. I'm old. I can't do this. Stop it.
Yep, pretty much. That's how I feel too. And you know, the SMS into notification, like I remember when they first did this with like Hangouts, and now they've done it with Facebook Messenger, and like you say, they're all kind of working on this because they want you to spend more time in their app. And at first I was like, man, that makes a lot of sense, because then that's one less app I have to worry about. But the problem is you still have all those other apps. So now you have to ask yourself where your SMS is appearing, if it's not appearing in one, but it's appearing in the other. And that is a layer of confusion. Yeah, it's a challenge. I've sometimes wonder whatever happened to like all the Trillions and the Digsbys of the world that could reasonably combine all these things together. I know they exist in some ways, but there are always kind of things that are missing, and it's just never ideal.
I'll tell you what the big problem is. You get a messaging app where it upgrades, it changes from one version to another, and then all the aggregators are behind. So they don't necessarily integrate that messaging app anymore. And so you're waiting then for the aggregator to update so that it can regain connectivity to the app that had already updated. And in the meantime, you're not getting any communication from anyone. And so with the speed of iteration and the multitude of messaging apps that are out there, aggregators are facing an uphill battle, and you're just like, forget it. I'll just go with all the apps. Yep.
And I don't know if, and I'll just let the notifications handle it. But then that's another point of contention, you know? It's like the notifications, are they adding clarity? You know, Mossberg makes a good point as far as like you return to something and you've got this stack of notifications waiting for you, the majority of which are outdated at this point. They've already been handled, or, you know, they were from yesterday. And it's just all noise. Sometimes it just feels like we're deflecting noise all the time. And I realize it was created to make our lives easier. But in aggregate, it just makes things way more confusing.
I think partly it was created for asynchronous communication, right? The idea that you could send something to someone, when they saw it, they could respond and send it back to you. But the problem is we're treating it like it needs to be synchronous communication, that it needs to be instantaneous. And we feel this sense of urgency whenever we see anything, whether it's another email in our inbox or a message on whatever notification, whatever messenger app you're talking about at the time. We feel the sense that we need to respond to it right away. And in fact, sometimes the person on the other end feels like they're owed a response right away, no matter what's happening. And it's creating a level of stress that I don't think was intended when people actually set out to design these apps.
Yes, agreed. Completely agreed. Motion carried. And we're all on the same page. All right, coming up, we're getting closer to recognizing bots as people, at least in the eyes of the law, apparently. But first, let's take a minute to thank Trunk Club. They are the sponsor of this episode. You might already realize this, but summer's here. If you didn't know, I'm telling you right now, it's time to, kind of spruce up your wardrobe, pick out some summer essentials, short sleeve button downs, lightweight blazers, swimwear, all that stuff. You might not enjoy going shopping for this stuff, but you need it. Whether you're looking for beach, formal attire, or grown-up graphic tees, Trunk Club is a shopping game changer for both men and women. With Trunk Club, you'll never have to step foot into a store for your clothing needs again. Plus, you get your very own personal stylist for free. That's personally, that's the best part in my opinion. Someone who knows you, who can find the clothes that work just for you. You just type in your measurements, share your style, your spending preferences. That'll connect you with the right Trunk Club stylist. He or she will contact you through phone, email, or messenger to understand your unique look and learn more about what you're looking for. I spoke with my stylist, Carolyn, on a quick 15-minute phone call, and we just kind of really dialed down into my own personal challenges as a really tall dude. And that's kind of what that initial contact is all about. Your stylist will select items for your trunk from over 80 top brands. We'll send you a preview of clothes that may be a good fit. You go through piece by piece, bounce anything you don't want to make, to ultimately make room for more options in the trunk. You review that trunk via email and then make the edits before it's shipped right to your door. Then you're going to have 10 days to try on the clothes, and all you have to do is keep what you like and send back the rest. You just seal it back up in the trunk, and that's it. Anything you decide to keep, kind of the best part about it is you can just like wear it right then and there because it's yours. Trunk Club is not a subscription service. Shipping is always free in both directions. Premium clothes, expert advice, no work, and that's thanks to your very own personal stylist at Trunk Club. Now, Trunk Club is backed by Nordstrom, which means they have the highest standards in quality and customer service. And if you happen to live in Dallas, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, or DC, you can stop by one of the Trunk Club clubhouses to work with your stylist in person for free. So make a statement, the next big event on your calendar with a look that's handpicked just for you and your style. Get started today at trunkclub.com/TNT. You'll look and feel your best with clothes that fit you perfectly. That's trunkclub.com/TNT, and we thank Trunk Club for their support. All right, so apparently this next block is all about bots on the road and the rights of bots everywhere. So we'll start with a topic that was discussed a little bit last week while I was out, but still kind of looming in the news. The reported fatal Tesla crash, along with a small handful of other incidents involving Tesla crashes attributed to the autopilot feature, has Tesla examining how it implements the feature, according to people familiar with the matter. Oh, those people. One solution could be automatically disabling the autopilot if the driver is unresponsive to the alerts to put their hands on the steering wheel. Apparently, an upcoming update to the autopilot feature is rolling out in a few months. Tesla is saying that no parts of that update will be tied to the fatal crash, and also is reiterating that the feature does not equate to turning the vehicle into an autonomous vehicle, and the driver is always responsible. So, I mean, I think that's kind of part of the issue right there is Tesla is repeatedly having to kind of reiterate that this is not an autonomous, this does not magically make it an autonomous vehicle. Why is that messaging not working for people? What do you think?
Well, let me sum it up to you this way. The feature is called autopilot.
There you go.
The name, I would argue, is misleading.
Yes.
And you could say, oh, well, an autopilot on a plane doesn't completely take over the plane. It really just maintains the course and might make a change if it's been programmed in, but it's not meant to replace a pilot. And you would be correct. But I think when you hear like someone's going on autopilot or setting something on autopilot, it's set it and forget it, right? That's the idea that most people have in their heads when they hear that phrase. I think the name of the service, the name of the feature is part of the problem. Language is a powerful thing. And if you tell people this is autopilot for your car, they're going to assume it can take over, despite the fact that in order to enable autopilot on your Tesla vehicle, you have to acknowledge a message from Tesla saying, keep your hands on the wheel, even in autopilot mode.
Yep.
Don't call it autopilot. Call it the driver assist system or something akin to that, because that's what it is. It is a system, or it's actually a collection of systems to assist a driver and aid in the case of emergency and make things easier for a driver, not to replace a driver. So I think the nomenclature needs to change, honestly. I think that's step one. And if you change that, then messaging gets easier. If you say, you know what, we don't have autopilot anymore, we have driver assist system. It's DAS, and it'll do things like help you with lane correction and crash avoidance and assisted braking and all these other things that autopilot actually does. Just don't call it that.
Yeah, that's a really great start. Yeah, I mean, we call, our previous and for very long, the feature that most people are used to in this vein that they've had for years is called cruise control. And you know, and for whatever reason, we understand that when we put on cruise control, that doesn't mean that we can disengage with driving. And so there's something about autopilot, you know, not just Tesla. I think this is going to be a wider problem for a lot of vehicles along this vein. It's really just the fact that people, as they get comfortable using a particular feature, it's easy to, you know, kind of, with that comfort comes trust, and it's easy to kind of disengage a little bit. Or, you know, like I think I read somewhere that, you know, a lot of drivers say that since using autopilot, they check their phones a lot more. And that's kind of like, that's like the no-brainer assumption to be made, which is that, well, I'm not supposed to check my phone when I'm actually driving, but now I'm not driving as much because the car's doing it for me, so I can check my phone. And it turns out you're supposed to still be as engaged with the road as you are, you know, when you aren't driving with autopilot. And that's a messaging issue that's just not getting through to people. And that, I feel like that falls on Tesla's hands.
I agree. I think Tesla has done, I mean, they've repeatedly said that this is not meant to replace a driver, but I don't think that is, I don't think it's enough. I think, again, like with that name and with the assumption that this is making driving safe, like you said, it encourages people to put that trust in the vehicle when perhaps that's not entirely merited. Not to say that Tesla doesn't engineer a great product or that it isn't actually improving the safety of its vehicles using this system, but if it's being used incorrectly by the driver and the standard messaging from Tesla isn't working, something has to change. Or else what we're going to see is a domino effect of this creating hurdles and setbacks for other types of driver assist systems and ultimately for autonomous vehicles.
Yep, absolutely. Now we're still talking about autonomous. Actually, 3 of the 4 stories here are about are kind of on this topic more or less. Tesla might not be actively working towards truly autonomous vehicles, or so they claim, but Google definitely is. And Google says they are now working to inform their sensors and their software to recognize cyclists on the road. Things like their hand signals that indicate, you know, where they intend to go, all that kind of stuff. The system can even detect the different types of bikes. So yes, if you're out there riding a unicycle, a Google autonomous car, self-driving car is going to know that you're on a unicycle for whatever benefit that has. I'm sure there's some benefit there, but it's going to know the difference.
Makes you wonder if it automatically labels a unicyclist as dweeb. I say that as someone who has ridden a unicycle. I couldn't resist.
You can say that, of course. You can, because you've ridden a unicycle. I can say
that. I didn't write it well, but this is cool. I mean, this is really neat. I wonder, I really am curious if they're building in, and this is going to sound snarky, but I mean it sincerely. If they're going to build in recognition, machine learning to recognize that sometimes in certain situations, cyclists may not always obey the rules of the road. Because I have often seen cyclists come up to a red light, look to see if there's any traffic, and then just go straight through, which technically they're not supposed to do.
Yes, see that a lot.
So it makes you wonder, because we also had the one Google crash that was quote unquote Google's fault when it assumed a bus was going to let the Google car in and it didn't. Does it mean that the Google car is also going to have to make assumptions that bicyclists may or may not be obeying the rules of the road as well? And you have to kind of assume that they're not necessarily going to follow it in order to make sure that you don't put them in danger.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, and I think actually they are, what they've learned in developing around this is that they have to inform the onboard system to drive, they say, conservatively around cyclists as a result of the things that they learn. And I think it's a really good starting point. I mean, time and time again, it just kind of goes back to the fact that humans are unpredictable, and there's only so much that you can determine through, a system of patterns and by using sensors, be it LiDAR or cameras to detect the obstacles that are around you. But a human can suddenly, for no obvious, apparent, or even good reason whatsoever, decide to take a sharp left turn right into the middle of traffic. That could happen. And I mean, it's next to impossible to program around that.
I mean, you could even have it happen for a completely innocent reason, like someone's riding their bike down the street and then a bee flies in their face.
Right.
The human reaction is blah, which cars don't necessarily know, but they have to be able to react to it.
I don't know. With enough testing, maybe the Google bots could determine that this means, oh no, a bee just flew in front of his face. And
right. It could
what
be.
is the automatic
they're
reaction?
giving me the signal. But I like that Google has pointed out that a lot of the members of their engineering team are bicyclists. And I thought, well, that makes sense, because to get around the Google campus, you just grab one of those bikes and you start going.
That's pretty much daily life at Google, is riding bikes. So that makes sense. Shifting robot gears to self-driving sidewalk robots that deliver things. That's what we'll talk about next. If you live in the UK, Switzerland, or Germany, get used to sharing the sidewalk with delivery robots built by Starship Technologies. We actually first chatted about these robots last April, and today the company announced that it will be deploying robots in 5 cities to test out the delivery service and introduce those cute little guys to the public streets. So you too might have to make sure that you don't trip over a rolling robot that's carrying around piping hot food. I would love to encounter one of these. I wonder how they're going to do. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm curious too. I mean, I realize that one of the reasons they want to do this kind of robot approach is that people are increasingly they increasingly want the things that they order online to get to them more quickly.
Yeah.
And this way you have an on-demand delivery service, which it's much easier to do with robots than it would be to employ people that would just consistently be coming back and being sent right back out. It would be really difficult to manage from a human resources standpoint, but with robots, it's much easier. I love the idea that essentially the robot is a locked box that when it arrives to you, I assume put a pin in your phone, which then will unlock the box so you can get your stuff. Because the first thing I thought was, what's stopping people from stealing the junk I bought?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, yeah, and still, like, what was the name of that robot, the Hitchbot, that tried to go across the country? I mean,
poor Hitchbot.
Yes, that could be a sign of things to come for whatever this little robot's called. I tried to find the name of this thing, but they don't tell you the name of the cute little robot delivery guy.
The first time you see one on the side of the road up on concrete blocks, it's just going to be so sad.
Oh, but it's
all six of its wheels stolen.
I wonder, yes, and but they're still spinning, trying to move. Right. It's like, seriously, get me out of here! It's not working. Why
did you teach me to feel pain?
Yes, like people, as if robots were people, which relates to our next story. The European Parliament drafted a motion dated May 31st that alludes to the fact that robots are becoming ever smarter, more autonomous, and pervasive, and that evolution requires a new analysis into what it means when it comes to liability and taxation. Their points that robots are taking human form, robots are doing human jobs, things, factory work, to surgeries. So it's not just, a robot in a factory, it's all sorts of things. Robots raise the fear of unemployment. So there's like the kind of implications of, with more robots come less jobs potentially, although there's a lot of studies that aim to debunk that. And just like as far as taxation is concerned, like, the need to declare what you're saving by employing a robot instead of a human in terms of like Social Security contributions, and that would need to be taxed because that would be the case otherwise. So robots becoming humans, it's happening. It's here, and live with it.
Look, if Star Trek: The Next Generation taught me anything, it taught me the toasters feel.
It's true.
I think this is really interesting. I agree with people who say that perhaps it's a little premature to argue that robots deserve personhood because they're becoming more autonomous.
Meanwhile, they're just like 6 wheels going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or they're just helping you by flying a little to the right and taking a picture of you, and then you can move it over here so it takes another picture of you. I mean, I think that part I don't really see eye to eye with. I think that we are decades away from having to worry about hurting a robot's feelings or having a self-aware machine, one that really requires to have its own set of rights. I think that might eventually happen, but it's not happening super soon.
Yeah.
But from the perspective of, well, if we're automating more and more jobs, and if, in fact, that does ultimately have a negative impact on employment, which, like you said, we're not necessarily seeing right now, but perhaps could happen in the future, then systems that rely upon employment in order to maintain themselves, like Social Security, would find themselves depleted. And yet people would still depend upon that. So how do you maintain the system while certain people are benefiting from automation and other people are hurting from it? And this seems to be like someone's best guess at a possible answer.
Right.
I don't have the answer for this. I don't necessarily think this is the answer. And we should also point out that even if this were to pass, it would be non-binding.
Yes.
So it's ultimately like a political thought experiment. It is cool to see people thinking about it seriously, however.
Yes. And it's important to, we've heard very recently, in fact, of kind of like, the kind of, the code of conduct for when you think about AI and programming AI, that so far down the future, if we don't put certain discussions into, people's brains and into people's conversations now, what are the long-term effects of if we continue going without those hard decisions? But it does feel a little early to think about, considering a robot as another human being, at least in certain degrees.
Agreed.
All right, so time for some feedback regarding yesterday's discussion around the cloning of pets and other animals. In particular, we talked about Stormcat, the racehorse that Drew Curtis from Fark.com mentioned had been cloned numerous times after its career had come to an end. Alex Cuttadine, a fan who has worked in thoroughbred racing for almost 20 years. Yes, we have someone who's worked in thoroughbred racing for almost 20 years as a fan of the show. Hails from Central Kentucky, wrote in to say, Drew stated that Stormcat was a Kentucky Derby winner when in reality the horse had a racing career cut short by multiple injuries after only 2 starts as a 3-year-old and 8 overall. With his performance in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, he surely would have been a Kentucky Derby contender. With a career cut short, Stormcat became a legend in the breeding shed, as he was the leading sire of graded stakes winners for multiple years and has left a vast legacy of offspring after his passing in 2013. While he didn't sire a Kentucky Derby winner himself, he was the great grandsire of last year's Triple Crown winner, American Pharoah. Stormcat, being one of the most influential sires in thoroughbred history, is why he was cloned. And if the rules of thoroughbred racing ever change, then his stud career will turn into a gold mine. What do you think, Jonathan? Do you think is cloning of performance animals like racehorses kind of akin to performance enhancement? I don't know. This is something we were talking about yesterday. I mean, you're raising them from the dead, basically.
This is a weird question, dude. Okay. So first of all, I should say off the bat that I find horse racing to be very difficult for me to get my head around in the first place, because I've seen people say, well, this could ultimately lead to a horse race with 20 secretariats. And what would be the point of that?
Right.
Which leads me to the question of, what's the point of horse racing? Like, I see where you're asking that question, but that leads me to ask, all right, well, just horse racing in general, what is the point? If the point is actually the ultimate test of a horse breeder's breeding program, that's weird, right? like it's weird no matter what. So this actually led me down an existential crisis path that I have yet to emerge from, Jason.
Fair enough. I thought you would have some interesting perspective on the idea of cloning racing animals, and I was right. Because I don't know how I feel about it either, to be quite honest. But it's an interesting thing to think about, and I love to know that we have smart fans in the audience that know way more about horse breeding and horse racing than Megan or I ever pretended to. So thank you so much for writing in and sharing your thoughts with us, Alex. We really appreciate it. TNT's fan of the day is Ron Weiler at @choir_guy on Twitter, who says he's a musician, a teacher, a family man, and tech enthusiast, and apparently we put at least his baby to sleep. Ron says TNT seems to comfort the baby. Baby's fallen asleep, does not find our discussion of horse racing in the least bit entertaining. And I suppose I understand. I get it. Show us how you watch or listen or fall asleep to TNT. Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup and post it on Instagram, Google+, Twitter, or Facebook, and use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT, and we will find it. All right, finally, we've discussed many an important application of things like artificial intelligence and bot technology, but consider for a moment what it's like to have to put your steak on a barbecue with your hands. I know. I'm sorry to put that thought in your brain, but one enterprising man decided he's not going to take it anymore. Instead, he'll put his drone to work. And on Canada Day, with a head-mounted camera and, of course, a drone-mounted camera, he speared a wire through his steak, sat on a chair outside with a barbecue burning in the distance, and did what any sane guy with a drone would do. He cooked that steak using the drone, flipping it when it was time, using just the airborne drone. Did it all with a drone. This is, I would say America, but this is Canada, so.
Right.
I don't know. I'm just sad I didn't think to do this first.
I have an unironic love for anyone who goes to a greater amount of trouble to accomplish a simple task than it would take to actually do it the traditional way. This is why I also love Rube Goldberg devices.
Yes.
Like anything where you have taken a creative approach to do something way harder than just the normal way. Kudos to you.
What I think I find most endearing about this is this guy is like super into it. Like he's way stoked. It was obvious that he was planning to do this on Canada Day for a really long time. And then like it was raining. And so throughout, he's like, it's raining today, but I don't care. Come hell or high water, I'm cooking this steak with a drone. And, at one point, it slams into one of the mounted cameras. So you get to see what it's like to be a camera hit in the face with a steak. It touches the ground a million times. Doesn't matter. And at the end, he takes a huge bite, and he's, like, super happy about it. So
also, that is a heck of a thick steak.
It is. Oh, I think we're about to get the bird's eye view. Or the boom. That's what it's like to get hit in the face with a steak. I'm
having flashbacks right now to a particular time in my college career.
Yeah, there is a time in my life if I actually, he's gonna take a bite of that steak, and we're gonna watch it. Apparently, yep. That's a drone steak right there. I don't know what else to say about that. Let's move on. Canada. Yes, tastes like Canada Day. Jonathan Strickland, always a pleasure getting you on the show, and we're actually going to have you again, I think, next Monday. Is that right? Something
it's
like
next
that.
week, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I'll check the calendar, but I know we're getting you back, and man, it's always so much fun to get you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I love being here. I'm a sucker. You can ask me anytime. I'm always going to say yes because I just absolutely have a fantastic time talking about the news with you guys.
Excellent. It's howstuffworks.com, and Forward Thinking is your other show, fwthinking.com, right?
That is correct. Yeah, we cover everything about the future. So if you've ever wondered, what is such and such going to be like in the future, we have either answered it or we will answer it in the future.
Excellent. That's what it's all about. Thanks again, man. I know you've got a busy night of podcasting and stuff, but I really appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, we'll see you in a couple of days.
Yippee.
All righty. And speaking of drones, actually, tomorrow's guest is going to be Father Robert Balasaire. Some people know him as the Quad Father. It's true. TNT records live every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. UTC at twit.tv/live. You can be a part of the show by emailing us at tnt@twit.tv. You can leave us a short voicemail at 260-TNT-SHOW. And you can also hit us up on Twitter. We're at Tech News Today TV. Real quick, before we go, I wanted to thank all of you who participated in the past with our annual Twit audience survey. It was essential at providing us with your thoughts, your feedback on our programming and advertising practices. And our partner, PodTrack Analytics, is currently asking avid podcast fans like yourselves to chime in and provide anonymous information about the trends and needs of podcast audiences. So if you'd like to participate and offer your voice in PodTrack's audience panel, you can do so. Visit podtrack.com/panel for more information. As for this show, you can always find all the ways to subscribe to TNT at twit.tv/TNT. And if you want to tweet at me, I'm at Jason Howell on Twitter. Thanks to our technical director, Kara Cole. Thanks to Chris for the words on the screen and all the folks who help us produce this show every single day. And thanks to you for talking tech with us. We'll see you all tomorrow. Bye, everyone.
High five yourself like a clap. Makes me. Yay!